For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we are heading off to Neverland, but with a little bit of a twist to talk about the new nightmare coming out of the Twisted childhood universe. This is Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. This version of Peter Pan tells the story of a child abductor a la The Black Phone. We'll get into it, but essentially a rescue mission from Wendy to rescue her brother Michael ensues to take down Peter Pan once and for all. Now, I, over the years, have been a huge champion of the Twisted childhood universe.
Blood and Honey, a 4 out of 5.
So I'm actually going to give a Rorschach correction to Blood and Honey. Last year I gave it a 4 out of 5. I'm actually going to give it a 3 out of 5 because the rightful heir to the throne of a 4 out of 5 belongs to this movie right here. And with that said, I enjoyed this movie, but for different reasons than the other two. Both entries we've gotten into this series prior to Neverland Nightmare have been really fun, really schlocky, and really just downright, like, kind of dumb, fun horror films that just feel akin to the 80s slasher boom. Neverland Nightmare, though, takes elements of the previously mentioned Black Phone and also that grime of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and even more modern films like Honeydew and creates something that is just uniquely uncomfortable and just downright disgusting. Now, please understand that I say disgusting in the highest of honors when I'm talking about genre pictures like Neverland Nightmare and the other ones that I've mentioned. I feel like anytime you deal with the subject of child abduction or anything with children really that just brings any type of harm to them, you really want to have a horror film that is going to be uncomfortable, that is going to be really sadistic and really just crawl into your skin. And I gotta say that this film hits all of those marks. I was incredibly uncomfortable during these 90 minutes. And I really got to say, I think a lot of the reason why this film works as much as it does is not just the cinematography and how atmospheric it feels, especially when you get into the Neverland portions of this that I'll talk about in just a few minutes, but it's really the portrayal of Peter Pan here, played by Michael Portlock. Portlock quite literally steals the show, channeling his best Heath Ledger's Joker in this. For better or for worse, you gotta love, you gotta hate it, but he's written in a way that is just very unpredictable, very sadistic, and honestly, that's part of the reason that I both loved and hated this portrayal of Peter Pan. I really love to see how Waterfield and Chambers really interpreted the lore of Neverland, Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, Hook, and all of that we, if you're like me, grew up with the Disney animated movie. But that's also where some of my dislikes for this movie came about. There are moments in this film that actually have Peter Pan contradicting himself, and that was one of the biggest things that drove me crazy. And I'm not going to specify here. If you guys have seen it, hit us up on social media, and I'll be more than happy to kind of dive into the spoilers. But just from a non-spoiler territory, that was one of the things that just dug under my skin, and just I couldn't leave it once I kind of started making these connections. But again, you almost kind of forgive it because of how electric and terrifying Portlock really is as this character. And there is this level of unpredictability that you can't help but just gravitate towards him as a character. Now, I think this film will definitely satisfy a lot of the genre fans that have been satisfied with the previous two Pooh films, or at least Blood and Honey 2. But I think this is going to be a film that is really going to alienate a lot of general audiences the way that the previous two films in the series have. While we're talking about things that will satisfy horror fans, this is a brutal slasher film. And I talked about how uncomfortable it is from the aspect of the child abduction stuff, and a lot of the Neverland stuff is just really, really uncomfortable to sit through. And again, I think it's really going to satisfy genre fans, but the gags and just the practical effects and the gore here will make you fall in love with this movie. And given the fact that there's already this like grimy atmosphere to it, when you mix in that blood and the high level of gore this film has, it really does feel very reminiscent. I've brought up Texas Chainsaw earlier. It definitely has that feel of the early one, but it also has that blood and that grime that the 2003 version of that story also brought. And the reason why it is among one of the best horror remakes that we have gotten. I will also say, in terms of pacing, there is this moment where it has what I would call the cuckoo syndrome, where the first two acts of this really just hit and just have this steady pace. It has you gripped. And then there comes this moment where in the last act of the film, it kind of hits this stall. And I feel like I had the same problem with Black Phone, and it just kind of hits that wall, and it doesn't really know what to do with this. There are a few surprises that they do manage to pull off, but it does feel far and few between because of just how it's written, how they kind of essentially wrote themselves into this corner. And with that said, I am ready to run this one through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare a 3.5 out of 5. I think overall this is a really solid addition to the Twisted Childhood universe, but it does manage to have some inconsistencies with its writing, but also at the same time with some of its pacing, especially in the third act. I really do appreciate how they interpret the lore of Peter Pan and kind of how they really bring it into this universe. It feels like narratively it steals from the Black Phone, but atmospherically it pulls from both the 1974 and 2003 version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, resulting in a really unique and uncomfortable and sadistic vision of Peter Pan. If you guys have seen Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, comment below and let me know what you guys thought. Am I crazy? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Comment below and let me know. Normally, this is the part of the video where we would address and talk about how this film talks about mental health. This film does deal a lot with mental health, with areas that I am not equipped or knowledgeable enough to talk on, including child abduction, child loss, etc. And I think that I'm just going to plug the importance of speaking on mental health and destigmatizing the stigma currently surrounding mental health. Suicide is currently the 11th leading cause of death in the United States. There are over 49,000 people that died by suicide in 2022, with an additional 1.6 million people that attempted to take their lives that very year as well. So if you or someone you know is struggling, click the links in our show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare is now playing in limited release, and I want to stress that it's a very limited release. It will be playing the 14th and 15th of January, and then it disappears until it ends up on streaming later this year. And in the show notes below, you guys will find links to where to find it, tickets in your city near you. You guys will also find links to our podcast network, more movie reviews like this, as the previously mentioned mental health resource library, and that subscribe button. So until next time, remember to keep it classy, keep it spooky.